Hello and welcome to the EDRM Global Webinar Channel. My name is Mack. I'm the CEO and Chief Legal Technologist for EDRM. Today's webinar is Apple's new messaging features will complicate e-discovery, especially with the iOS 16. Our faculty experts are Jarrett Coco, Colin, Duncan, and Michael Scholz. We welcome your questions and feedback in the council. This is your opportunity to ask some questions of some experts. And please take a look at the attachments tab. That is your paperclip along the side of your console there. You can read Jarrett's article that was on Law 360, Apple's new messaging features will complicate e-discovery. Learn more about Nelson Mullen's e-discovery practice. Check out how Jarrett can assist you. And then your insights are welcome for a e-discovery total cost of ownership survey for fall of 2022. That's a new survey. And up next on the EDRM Global Webinar channel on the 9th, reduce spend on e-discovery using the IGRM. And after the webinar, you can download a certificate of completion and attendance from your console. Now, our faculty. Jarrett Coco is a partner with Nelson Mullins. Jarrett practices in the area of business litigation, pharmaceutical and medical device litigation, e-discovery, litigation readiness, and records and document management. With him, Colin Duncan is an e-discovery collection specialist at Encompass with 10 years experience in e-discovery and digital forensics. Specializing in hands-on extraction of mobile devices, local drives, share drives, and cloud-based repositories. He's got over 4 years with Encompass and over a decade as a digital forensics examiner special agent with the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. With him, his colleague, Michael Scholz, also an e-discovery collection specialist with Encompass. And he's got over 6 years experience in digital forensics and e-discovery. And he holds more certifications than I know what to do with: a CBE, an ACE, a CCLO, a CCPA, and a CASA certification. And he's a graduate of the Citadel. So we've got quite a team who has delved into Apple, iOS 16, and the new features in messaging that are kind of going to jostle us in the e-discovery world. Jarrett, take it away. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. And thanks so much for having us. This is a great opportunity for us. We really appreciate the interest in it, and all the folks who have joined really appreciate it. So just real quick background on us. Mary did a great intro. Colin and Michael and I work very closely. My practice is focused on e-discovery, but it really has switched or sort of heading towards mobile data. I just wind up doing more and more mobile. Mobile data just becomes more and more prevalent in my practice. And Colin and Michael are great partners, and great assets to the firm here. They're two of our collection specialists. And we're always sort of watching what's going on in the market. And so when we saw, I think it was maybe like spring, Michael, when you sort of flagged the new iOS for me, really interesting. They were sort of previewing that they were going to have some new features, right? And those new features included messaging changes, like the ability to edit and delete messages. And we knew, that was going to be interesting for us because messages are always sort of front and center with mobile device collection, and we're always interested in what's sort of new and happening in the industry, especially as the technology sort of progresses. So all that said, I think we want to kind of go through a few things today. We want to talk about what's new about iOS 16 and kind of step through at a high level what the features are, what's different. And then we'll talk about what we did, on our side to kind of figure this out and kick the tires on it. And then we'll talk about why it's important, right? So why is this new stuff important to e-discovery? And then we can talk about what it means to your practice, right? So how you might need to adjust your practice or what you might want to think about when your next mobile device sort of shows up in litigation or in an investigation or something like that. And Mary said, please, any questions, put them in the channel. Glad to, take them at any time. We're pretty easygoing in that regard. So, all right. So, Colin, Michael, you want to tell us about these new messaging features?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jarrett, and thank you everyone for having us on this afternoon. I do want to make sure I'm not muted. Okay, I'm ready to go. All right, fantastic.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, excellent. Again, thanks, Jarrett. So you can see the adoption rates for iOS 16 upgrades roughly 3 weeks after its release. Not even a quarter of all users had upgraded. So these people either refuse to be early adopters, they don't want to see a degradation in their phone's performance, which is natural given a release, or shortly thereafter Apple releases one, or they actually like that annoying red notification icon displayed on their settings app. I used to try to be the inbox zero guy, tried to clear those all the time. I now can't keep up. I just have too much email traffic, too much messaging traffic to keep that down to zero. But nevertheless, it's now estimated about roughly 50% of iPhone users have upgraded to the latest iteration of the OS. So if you're still rocking an iPhone 7 or earlier, your device isn't supported. So you may want to join us in this century if you want to use the latest iOS and its features. Having said that, users who have upgraded now have a 15-minute window. All right, so you've got a 15-minute window to make edits within the phone's native messaging app, or in particular iMessage, meaning a user cannot edit or unsend SMS text messages. So, and this is understandable, right? So as SMS content travels across a cellular network or a tower, and it's not handled in the same manner as one's iMessages and going across an Apple server. But assuming both users, being the sender and the recipient, have upgraded to iOS 16, they might notice a notice will display within the conversation thread to show that the messages were edited or a message was edited. And users can now tap to see unedited versions or the edited versions of the iMessage. They can see both the edited version and the version that it now reverts to, or the new version. A notification is also displayed when an iMessage is unsent. So while Apple has given the sender of an iMessage 15 minutes to edit a message, they've limited this recall function, this unsend function, to just 2 minutes. And you might notice on the slide that Apple has added an animation similar to an explosion when an iMessage is recalled. We were able to grab just a snippet of that, or just a one frame from an actual video, just to kind of give you a sense of what Apple does. And it truly is obliterating the message. And I'm going to let Michael speak to that a little bit later about where that message lives or does not live. If the recipient user hasn't upgraded to iOS 16, so if I'm sending Jarrett a message and I've upgraded, but he's still rocking his iPhone 4S, then he's just going to see a second message that says edited to. All right, so it's not going to perform the actual edit on his device, and the unsent message, anything that I would try to unsend, trying to go to Jarrett, would not be removed from the recipient's device. Though again, there will be a notice showing that the sending user tried to unsend a message. So you'll see a message, a follow-up from Apple saying this user tried to unsend you something, but again, it will still live on the recipient's device as it would have previously. The user will now have the ability to recover deleted messages. So it's real similar to the camera roll. If you were to go and mass select images and then designate those for the trash bin or to be deleted, they go into a temporary holding cell, if you will. And if you accidentally delete a message, or if you get a one-time passcode, but you really needed that passcode additionally, or for another instance, you're able to go back and restore that. And it's real similar to the album, the photo album restore. You've got about 30, you've got 30 days. So if you accidentally delete a chat conversation, you've got 30 days to restore it. That means any message deleted after the user upgrades to iOS 16 will continue to exist on the device in a like a recently deleted status for 30 days post deletion. Again, this is only for users who have upgraded. And again, half of the iPhone community has not yet upgraded.
And Colin, that's both,
sure.
That's both SMS and iMessages, right?
That's correct, Jarrett. However the message is transmitted, it still goes and lives in this same repository. That's correct. So after those 30 days, though, the messages will roll off the device, and that includes the single messages that are deleted, as well as any full conversation threads that might have been deleted. But if users want, like, if you delete a message and you say, yeah, you know what, I know about this repository, I know that they go to live in this like little purgatory place for 30 days, but I really want them gone, or I don't need them, I need to free up space. You can make sure that they're gone, or double delete them. So you can go back into that repository, that separate library of messaging, and select, I truly wanted to delete this like now. I don't want this to live on my device for another 30 days. And again, most notably, unsent messages are not recoverable as recently deleted. They do not get that designation on either device. And again, Michael will speak to that. So I'm a little bit more about me, or I guess how we stumbled upon this. I'm an avid reader of many a tech blog, namely ones that discuss emerging technologies, new devices that are in the works, mainly because these sites, they get leaked information from Apple, so-called Apple insiders or Android insiders. And so you get to learn a lot of this tech news when you may not hear it from other outlets, or any of the other main tech outlets or publications. So we knew some of these changes would be coming long before the iPhone 14 was announced or iOS 16 was released. And we were very interested when we read about the new features coming to iMessage and what they could possibly mean for our methodologies going forward. So my colleague Michael Scholz is here, and he'll speak to how those new features have changed our approach to both collection or to all collection analysis and the review phase. Michael, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. So like Colin mentioned, with all these new features being implemented, we really wanted to understand what this meant for us from a collection and review standpoint. We wanted to know, are we going to get these versions, or are we only going to get that last edited version of the message? For the unsent messages, are we going to be able to find those on the device? Do they still live there somewhere, or are they truly gone once you hit that unsend operation? So when the first beta version of iOS 16 was released, we installed that on a few of our test devices, and Colin and I started chatting back and forth. We started deleting messages and threads, editing messages, unsending, just really playing around with all the new features, and getting a feel for how they acted on the device itself. And then we performed a few different types of collections with using our forensic tools, and started digging around in the device to see, okay, how does it look in the back end? And at first glance, it appeared that we weren't going to get these edits or these unsends. It just appeared as empty chat bubbles in the messaging threads. And that was a little concerning at first. We promoted a few of our reports to our review workspace, and they displayed the same way. You'd have some conversation, but as soon as an edit occurred or an unsent message happened, it was displaying as an empty chat bubble. So we went back to our extractions. We started taking a deeper look at some of the file system logs. We took a look at the databases, and eventually we were able to find, okay, these edit both the original message and the edited version do exist in the database. It's still a very manual process to extract that info from the phone database and put it into a reviewable format. I know a lot of the software vendors, they are aware of this. They're catching up. So it's coming, down the pike. So we're happy. We're going to be really happy when that happens. And hopefully it makes our job a little bit easier to get these edited versions into a reviewable format. And Colin also mentioned the deleted messages. So the deleted messages go to this 30-day repository, and they still exist on the device, but they are no longer associated with the parent thread. They are, considered orphan messages, and they're located in the instant message or the IM area of our tools. So right now we're trying to figure out how do we marry these back to the appropriate thread, put them in the rightful order, and get them into that nice reviewable format for our attorneys. And again, it's something that we're working on. I know a lot of our vendors are working on this, but it's definitely changing the way that we're having to handle it right now. And it's going to have a big impact on how text messages are reviewed. And with that, Jarrett, I'll turn it over to you to kind of talk about the impact that this is having right now.
Sure. And I did just see a question about impact on legal holds and policies practices. That's coming. So we'll get to that in a little bit. That's slide 4 or 5. I can't remember. So why is this significant, right? So we just heard Michael and Colin talk about the new functionality. Michael talked about what it means in the database and what kind of process changes we'll need to do. So assuming like that we're in the current state, right, where our collection vendors are still, we're having to deal with these messages on a more manual way. There's going to be an increase in the time, burden, and expense to deal with new phones, right? So with phones, meaning with iOS 16, and phones that have edited or recalled messages, or even recently deleted messages, because we're going to have to sort of go into those and figure out how to put them back together, basically. And so, that makes me think, I think a lot about this stuff. It makes me think about, Rule 26, right? And the burden and expense of producing documents, proportionality, and that type of thing. And again, I'm sure technology is catching up, and there may be a time where this is not more burdensome. But at least for now, that factor exists, right? It reminds me, Mary, of the old days with backup tapes. Back in the day, I'm saying back in the day, like 10 years ago, backup tapes, you'd have to restore backup tapes, in order to figure out what's on them, right? And so there's a lot of burden and expense and time that you'd have to invest to figure out what's on old email backup tapes. Whereas there's more technology now. I understand that there's vendors out there and ways where you can, put, and I'm talking about actual backup tapes, like the actual tapes, see what's on backup tapes without having to restore them completely. Although I think there is some burden and expense associated with that. But that sort of reminds me of where we're at now. Is sort of similar, where we've got something that's going to take more time and manual human review, basically a lot of Michael and Colin's time. And possibly a lot of lawyer time, right, to work with those, with folks like Michael and Colin to figure out how to make sense of these messages. And so there's that, right? So there's time, burden, expense. And it's also just significant to me that that these features exist. I don't know if anybody else was struck by it, but the fact that that a user can send a message to a recipient's phone and then reach back over to that phone and grab it and pull it back or wipe it, basically. I think what goes on, and Michael, keep me honest, is the row still exists in the database on the receiver's phone, but it just wipes the body of the message when you unsend it.
Correct.
So that's just significant to me. Like, when you think about email, you have this sort of writing ability. You can always write to somebody else, to a recipient's inbox, or you can write to a recipient's phone, but you can't really edit it, right? So if you try to recall an email, you don't actually recall it, right? You're just sending an email that says, hey, Jarrett Coco would like to recall that email that he accidentally sent to you or something, but it doesn't actually wipe that email out of that person's inbox. They can still read it and be like, oh, what an idiot. He sent this email and shouldn't have sent it to me. But now it's different. As long as you do it within 2 minutes, you can actually go and grab that message and pull it back. That's, to me, is significant. And so it sort of begs the question, right? Like, what'll happen now? So I've got here new battlegrounds on the slide deck. You can kind of see, right, how there's going to be, or there could be, disagreements about this kind of stuff, right? So it may be that, attorneys will try and place value or put some meaning on something, like if a message was edited, right, on a certain day, that might be significant. Or if a message was recalled on a certain day, that might be significant. If you think about, like, maybe a certain, certain conversation thread between people comes under scrutiny, and you can almost picture a deposition happening where, like, well, why did you edit this message? And look at this version of this message compared to this one. Or, like, why did you unsend this message? You can sort of think about how, a deponent sitting in there can say, like, I have no idea why I unsent the message 9 months ago, and there's probably an innocent reason for it, or there could be, not innocent reasons for it. For example, like, before iOS 16 existed, my wife actually texted me and was wanting, like, the Wi-Fi password, right? So she's like, what's the Wi-Fi password? And I'm an e-discovery lawyer, so I'm like, I don't want to write down the Wi-Fi password, right? So I'll call her. And so I call her, and she's like, why are you calling me? Now I have to write it down. I'm like, don't write it down. But that would be a legitimate use, right? You'd be like, I could send the Wi-Fi password and then unsend it once she read it. But that's just also me being a lawyer and sort of overthinking it. You can also think about, preservation, right? So how can these new features impact preservation? So you think about, like, the question in the channel about the duty to preserve triggering, right? So if the duty to preserve triggers on January 1, and then somebody unsends a message on January 2, what does that mean? Like, are we going to, our attorney's going to start looking at this and say, what did you unsend? Was that a relevant message that you unsent, and now we don't have it? Did you spoliate evidence by unsending a message? And I'm thinking about situations where, maybe you're in receipt of, like, a preservation notice, but you don't have a complaint, right? So you've got opposing counsel sent a preservation notice or a demand letter, and the company sends out a legal hold. If somebody unsends a message, is that going to be significant or not? You can think about how that would have some ramifications, if so.
Well, and Jarrett, I'd like to jump in. I think it also would be beneficial to, we need to determine the direction of that unsend. So I could be placed on a legal hold, and Colin could reach in and technically remove a message from my device. So, the deep diving a database and really getting into the phone's file system and determining, did I unsend that message from my phone, or did somebody else execute the operation?
Right. Could you cause someone else to spoliate evidence? If somebody's not on legal hold, could you get somebody else in trouble by unsending something in their on their phone? Who knows, right? Like, it's something I've thought about, and Michael, that's a cool new angle too about that.
So Jarrett, I might be misunderstanding, but if I send a message to you, and then I decide to edit the message, you still see on your phone, you have the capability on your phone to see what I edited?
Yes. So I can see the original, and then I can see how you've edited it. Yeah.
So the purpose of editing when you send to somebody is so that you send them a different message, not
Right.
all. So this looks to me like track changes on steroids. Like you could see people's intent and how they'd like to shade in it and frame an issue.
Sure.
Those kind of things. And I'm surprised by that. I would think if I edited, you wouldn't be able to see it. So yeah.
No, you can, and you have to tap on the little red edit thing under the bubble. But you can see, and I think you can edit it up to, I don't know, like 6 times or something, Michael. I can't remember how many times, or I'll Colin if you know, but many times you can edit the same message many times. And so you could see, 4 or 5 different iterations of the same message, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah. But also the unsend, Mary, like, so like if you unsend a message that you just sent me, it blows up, it's gone. Like I can't see it, you can't see it. It's not in the recently deleted folder, so we can't get it there. So that's significant, And then if you think about like the recently deleted folder, right? And Colin was sort of explaining that and sort of analogizing it to the recently deleted photos. If you're in your photos, you can see the photos that you recently deleted. So whenever you delete a message now, it's going to be in this folder, and it's on this like slow conveyor belt that's like headed towards the cliff, right? And there's nothing you can do to stop it unless you restore it and put it back in your messages. And so you can think about being a legal hold recipient, right? And if you've received a legal hold on January 1, right, but you just deleted a bunch of stuff a few days earlier, that stuff's still on your phone, right? It's still recoverable. You should go and get that stuff and restore it. And so we'll talk a little bit about, how this will impact any discovery lawyer's sort of perspective, and how it might impact, your processes and the way you're thinking about phones when you just got to be cognizant of that these capabilities exist, I think. Legal holds.
Hey, Jarrett, I wanted to interject if I could right there. When you mentioned like the conveyor belt illustration, it reminded me of the number of custodians that we've approached either in interviews or that you've reached out to regarding a legal hold. And the first thing that you ask them is, I need you to check your message retention policy on your device. And this predates iOS 16. This goes way back, but you've got
you just
messaging people as A's.
You went out there for a second, Colin.
All right, am I back?
You're back.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I'm just talking about the message retention policy and just how it applies. It looks like I'm getting a bad signal again. But Jarrett, I think you know where I'm going with the message retention. Yeah.
I do. And Colin is talking about how, like, when you're talking with custodians and having interviews, when you're talking about phones, the sort of steps that we typically do, right? So like when you're interviewing a custodian and you're asking them about him or her about how they use their phone, typically you're walking through the phone, right? You're saying, okay, you've determined as a lawyer, like, okay, there's probably relevant messages on the phone. Mobile data is at play in this litigation, so we need to make sure that this stuff's preserved until we can get it collected. So we typically will walk through the settings on the user's phone. We'll want to know when the last backup occurred. We'll go to the message retention settings, on the phone. And if it's not set to forever, we want to get it set to forever so that nothing sort of rolls off the phone. Like if they have it set to 30 days, potentially relevant messages could roll off. But this functionality is different, right? Because there is no switch we can flip to turn off recently deleted, right? It's basically on the user to go to the recently deleted folder, identify anything that might be relevant and restore it. Or the phone needs to be collected right away so that stuff is it doesn't roll off the slow conveyor belt into oblivion, right? So you have to think about how your custodian interviews might be altered, you might want to ask, have you edited or unsent messages to certain individuals that might be relevant? Speaking about how the settings are, like you might want to walk them through how to go to their recently deleted messages and restore those that are relevant. And with your legal holds, I've got legal holds up here too. Like, does it make sense to adjust language in legal holds, right? Do you want to flag that, excuse me, that users should go to the recently deleted folders and make sure that anything relevant gets kicked back into the messages application? Do you want to, sometimes we create like one page or sort of instructions, like easy to follow, paint by number instructions. Like, does it make sense to create a one pager that says, here's how you would do those steps? Like, so if you're sending out a legal hold that says, check your settings, here's how you do that, right? So like, here's how you go into the settings and make sure that you're set to keep forever. Here's how you go to your recently deleted folder and restore anything that is relevant and recently deleted. Maybe your policies or procedures could use some freshening up with this. Do you want to have anything in there that sort of addresses editing and deleting messages and recently deleted messages? I saw, like, back when this functionality first came out on Twitter, there's somebody who was advocating just turning off iMessaging altogether, right? So that you can't even use the editing or unsending functions. That's like a nuclear sort of option, but it would be effective at least in that, but it wouldn't help the recently deleted stuff because that affects SMS and iMessage messages. And then you just gotta kind of think about having a plan. I think you don't want the first time you're dealing with this to be on a really important phone, where you've been sent out to get this phone and you run into this for the first time on the phone. That's why Colin and Michael and I spend so much time testing this and kicking the tires and making sure we've got our processes in place. We've all been in a situation before where we've got to go pick up a phone, and then 10 minutes after you unplug it, everybody's saying, what's on the phone? When can we get that data? Where are the relevant texts? And it's like, we just unplugged it 10 minutes ago. It's going to take some time. This could compound that, right? There could be more time where it takes to you can get to the phone. I mean, it's always in the weeds that takes the longest, right? We can get the phone and we can get most of the stuff pretty quick. It's the stuff that's buried. It's the stuff that's weeded that takes the time.
So I think Jared, we had a question. Does the owner of the device or the admin have the capability to block access to edits?
That's a great question. So you can, it is configurable, and Michael, back me up on this. I think we talked about this, like with an MDM, so mobile device management tool, like Mobile Iron, for example, you can turn off iMessages, which would in effect turn off the ability to edit and unsend messages. That user would only be able to send SMS messages, and that could be a configurable, depending on what product you're using and how you're set up. That could be a configurable thing where the admin restricts the ability and prohibits the ability to edit or unsend messages. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. I think I see a couple other tools. I'm sorry, questions. What collection tools did you use for pre-release testing? Michael, do you want to cover that?
Sure. Yeah, we used Celebrite for our collections. We also used Magnet Axiom just to kind of compare the data sets to make sure we were getting the same results across multiple tools, and we were. So again, we mainly limited our testing to Celebrite and Magnet Axiom. Right.
And we use relativity, and we typically export in RSMF format to relativity. So that's the sort of setup that we used. And then, from a privacy standpoint, what kind of can of worms has been unleashed? It's a good question. Privacy. So privacy is so tricky, right? Especially like if you've got a personal device that has relevant information on it, right? There's a whole host of scenarios and a whole different ways that you can go with that. But it's significant. I think the guiding principle is letting the user know that, if there's relevant stuff on the phone, like you have to preserve this stuff. Here's what you need to do to preserve it. And then collecting it is the next step, which can be complicated. And there's again many avenues you can go, but the sort of guiding principle there is making sure the user knows that they're responsible for preserving that information, and then getting that stuff collected in the most in the most least intrusive way possible.
So, Jarrett, for the cases and the matters that are ongoing that started last year, do you think that those case teams need an update for this new capability, or is this just something you think that will be from this point going forward?
So if you've got an existing case and there's no end date on your relevant date scope, right? So if there's an ongoing duty to preserve information, like there's no agreement with opposing counsel that the relevant date scope ended at for example, like the filing of the complaint. If there's an ongoing duty, then it is significant. You should be making sure that users are aware that anything that they're continuing to send, on their phone could be relevant and would need to be preserved, right? And that editing and unsending messages, deleting, is not something that you'd want to do. You'd want to make sure that that stuff is preserved. And so there could be, potential, with these capabilities for that to have an impact, right? And you're thinking about unsending messages. A user might not think, oh, I'm on a legal hold, I can't unsend this message. But again, if it's not a relevant message, you can unsend it, but it's better probably to not unsend it if you're under legal hold, as if it's with somebody that that could be relevant to the litigation. It's just going to open up questions and scrutiny, So.
All right, we have another question. This is a technical question from a forensic standpoint. What do you consider to be more challenging with regards to analyzing data, especially if syncing with other devices is indicated?
I don't know, Michael. I have some thoughts, but I want to let you speak first.
I'll let you jump in first, Jarrett, and then I'll tag along.
Okay. So more challenging with regards to analyzing data. If you're talking about syncing with other devices like an Apple, like an iPhone and an iPad, sort of that perspective. We've had situations where we've done gap analyses between devices, right? So where there's messages here but not here type of thing, and that can be very challenging, especially if you're doing gap analyses with other users' devices where they're talking to each other. We've done that a good bit. That's very challenging. And I think that this opens up, this type of functionality opens up even more challenges, right? So if you've got, what if you've got edited versions on one phone but not another, and if you've collected two phones and you've produced them in litigation, and there's an edited message on one but not the other, is that going to draw scrutiny, or is it going to raise questions? There's all kinds of minutia that you can get into with syncing and gap analyses between devices. Michael, what do you think? We've done a bunch of that stuff.
Yeah, I was just thinking, more from there's just a lot of questions. Are these devices actively syncing with the cloud? Do they have message syncing on? Are they truly being synced across, a Mac and an iPad and maybe multiple devices? So it definitely brings some challenges with it, trying to identify, where did the edit occur? Is it on multiple devices? Do we have different versions? across, an iPad or a Mac. Um, yeah, Jared, I think you covered most of it.
Yeah. It's definitely a can of worms. Yeah.
Guys, do you still have me audio wise?
Yeah, we got you, Colin.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, and I just wanted to speak to this just briefly, but it's either out of and I don't think it's laziness or maybe it's just a lack of technical know-how. But we may see a lot of times where custodians will have the same Apple ID across several devices, shared with spouses, shared with partners, shared with siblings. And I think it's just probably about usability and or just ease of setup. So a lot of times we have to be sure we're collecting messages from the right device, or in the era of COVID and more remote collections, we've had to pull down backups, but then parse each backup because it may be coming from a child's device versus the actual custodian for whom we're trying to collect from. So and Michael's seen that several times, I know, when we're trying to figure out, all right, what serial number is the message in question tied to? And so we do have to do some deep diving there to find out, all right, where did the device or what the messages, the actual content that's relevant to the matter, where does that actually live? Where did it originate? So again, I think it's just because people set up families and it's just easiest to sign in with one ID, or we're just one ID, and we'll pay with one credit card for apps or in-app purchases. And I think that's why we get user IDs that just kind of cross-pollinate and conflate things sometimes.
Yeah, so that can make it even more complex. Yeah, agree.
So we continue to get questions, and we want to encourage more questions. Do you have any thoughts on training challenges, especially for smaller firms?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not, the users, what the user has to do is not that complicated, right? I think there's ways that you can walk through that with the user. So if you're a smaller firm and you've got a single client or a few clients, in a case, you just sit down and educate them. So it's important that you, as the attorney, understand this functionality, I think, and you just sit down with that client and make them understand. Here's your obligations. We're in litigation. You have a duty to preserve. Don't do this, this, and this. Oh, by the way, iOS 16 is new. This new functionality exists. Make sure you're doing the right thing. And also, those one-pager instruction things I think are very helpful. Especially if you've got a client that's a company and you're sending out a legal hold to a lot of folks, and you can't sit down with 35 people, because that's a lot. You can send out, one-pager instructions on, with screenshots that just sort of like, go here, go to settings, go here, sort of step by step, paint by numbers, make sure you do this type thing. That can be very effective, and I think people appreciate it too when they're, receiving a legal hold, to have sort of like step-by-step instructions on what to do to make sure that they're doing the right thing. Because I think people want to do the right thing. They want to make sure that they're complying with their preservation obligations.
Okay, and the last question we have, and again, we encourage more, with respect to data protection and privacy regulations, do you have any thoughts on implications for that?
Yeah. I mean, privacy is always comes to the forefront, right? When you're thinking about mobile devices, specifically with these features, I'm not sure if this sort of makes it more complicated, the privacy question more complicated or not. I need to think through that a little bit more. But privacy is always something that you have to be cognizant of when you're collecting someone's personal device in litigation. So let's say someone used their personal device to text substantively about relevant information. There's many ways that you can deal with that. I sort of plugging myself. I wrote an article about that a little while ago that sort of dives deeper into what that is and sort of the things you should be thinking about when you're thinking through collecting someone's personal device. Probably too much to get into now, and also I just don't remember everything right now because I haven't thought about it in a month. But definitely something to think through and be cognizant of for sure.
Very good. And we've got some more questions coming in. So with regards to policies and procedures, around your legal holds and preservation, would you provide the who? What roles should be part of the process in drafting these updates?
Oh, who should be part of the process in drafting the updates?
Yeah. So we've got, I'm assuming it's not just legal.
Right. So you definitely want to bring in IT, right? So if you're, it's going to be tailored to your organization, right? So like, not everybody has an acceptable use policy or a BYOD policy. Those are ones you should think about. When you're thinking through this, like, what does my BYOD policy say? Do we need to make any kind of revisions to address the editing and unsending of messages and the recently deleted stuff? So I think as the lawyer, you should be thinking about that and sort of presenting that, and IT, get IT involved. You should have a partner in IT who deals with mobile, or probably do, or you might have a vendor, who provides MDM and mobile guidance for you. That should be somebody that you partner with as well. And then think through whether your policies need to address that. I'm not saying that every policy needs to be updated or that even you need to update any policies, but it's something to think about when you're when you're appreciating that these new features exist and that they have these type of implications to discovery.
Very good. And our last question is a little bit off topic, so we'll save that one to the end.
Well, I think, Mary, that's all I've got. Actually, the last.
Well, then we have another question.
All right.
All right. I'm glad you put your contact information up there as well. But we'll continue answering questions as long as you guys are willing. So this one is a little bit off topic, but the listener is curious how eDiscovery handles encrypted messaging applications such as Signal that can send disappearing messages and also has added logging in steps to the app. Are there tools in place that can collect information from these types of apps? And if not, how does that play into legal discovery?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we often deal with apps like Signal or WhatsApp or Telegram. Michael, do you want to talk about that, or Colin?
Yeah, Jarrett, I can jump in and speak from the collection side. A lot of it depends on the type of extraction we're able to obtain. If we're able to obtain like a full file system extraction of the device, then we are able to capture a lot more data than we would if we, just got a basic advanced logical or iTunes backup of a device. So that really plays into what we're able to do and what we're able to provide to our attorneys and to review. Jarrett, I'll let you speak, more to the review process or how it affects legal discovery.
Right. But I mean, and just a little bit more on that, Michael, like an advanced logical or like an iCloud collection still provides, the messaging, the full messaging database, right? So we'd have like all the native messaging and almost everything that's on the phone. I think there's when there's fragments or ephemeral stuff, like that's when like a full file. Is that what you're?
Right. Yes. Some of the databases, don't come through with certain types of extractions because of how they're stored on the device, or certain data doesn't come across the wire.
Right.
So, yeah, if we have the option to do a full file system, we are absolutely going to do that if it's needed for the matter. If these types of applications are at play.
Right.
Yeah. And Jarrett, you've already spoken to privacy, but I wanted to mention too that a full file system extraction a lot of times yields some health data and maybe some activity data that would otherwise not be collected using an advanced logical or an iCloud collection. So I know a lot of investigations that involve people's whereabouts, or where was someone walking or running at a certain moment in time. If you're looking at a timeline, or trying to put somebody somewhere at a certain particular time, that would be critical in those instances to get a certain type of extraction over another. So
Right.
again, I, coming from law enforcement in a previous life, I know that would be vital to help paint a picture there.
Right. And we've done stuff like that, Colin, too, right? Where it was important to know where someone was at a certain time, and we could see, searching on the internet, and then, clicking on like get directions and going to the maps application, and then getting the turn-by-turn directions all time stamped. All that stuff can be important.
Absolutely, yeah, Mary. It really was critical to a case recently where there were certain searches made on a phone that helped us put someone in a certain spot where he said he wasn't, or he was. We had conflating stories, but the phone really did a beautiful job, and the tools with which we work did a great job putting that person, painting the picture overall for us better so than we otherwise would have had.
Yeah. I mean, we're all walking around with these little supercomputers in our pocket, right? And it's just there's a lot of stuff,
Yeah, it'll keep track of us for sure. So we've got another question on costs. So based on your experience, to what degree has iOS 16's functionality complicated the process, and what do you think the impact will be on costs, like a per, let's just say per device cost?
Yeah. And it's a lawyer answer. It depends, right? So I think it's going to depend on when that person upgraded, how many edits there are, how many deleted unsent messages there are, how many like recently deleted relevant messages do we have to piece back together. I think a lot of it depends on volume, because I think Michael, Brett, and Colin, make sure I'm saying this right, but I think that would depend a lot on how much time somebody like you or you guys would have to sit and compile this stuff and put it back together and present it in a way that the lawyers can then start looking at it and coding it and getting it ready for production. You agree with that, Michael, Colin?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Jarrett. And I guess you could call it the CSI effect. When people solve crimes in 44 minutes with I think a jury wants to see the same, so or a judge, and so we try to give similar results, and with our messaging especially, we like to paint a picture with the conversation view and the bubble view. Nobody wants to see an Excel spreadsheet with messages if we can provide them a better product.
Right. But as far as like hard costs, though, Mary, I don't think we haven't done any kind of like delta, like cost delta analysis on that yet. We just haven't had the situation arise where we need to do that. But I think it's there. It's something. There's going to be somebody like lawyers and forensic folks like Michael and Colin putting more work in, to get it done. So it's something. I just don't know what.
Yeah, there's definitely extra steps. And now we have a question that's verifying what the listener thought they heard. So, so did you guys say that if the phones are managed by a MDM, mobile device management, that this feature for iMessages can be turned off, and that it will only allow the user to send SMS messages, which those SMS messages cannot be edited or recovered after deletion?
So the answer is a partial yes. So we did say that there are MDM software out there where you can configure and control as the administrator the ability to use iMessages. And so since edits and unsends are only available for iMessages, if you as the administrator can turn that off, iMessages altogether, all they can do is SMS, then yes, that's what you can do. I'm not sure about the second part of the question. which those cannot be edited. Oh yeah. So SMS messages cannot be edited or unsent, I think is the word that they want to use instead of recovered. Unsent.
Yeah, and Jared, just to kind of tag onto that, I mean, so and now we have to make that determination: was a message unsent or was it deleted? Because if it was deleted, it's still in that recovery bin or recycle bin for 30 days. So if they toggled off iMessage and the user was only allowed to send SMS but decided to delete a thread, that would still live in that recovery bin for 30 days and could be reinstated or put back on the device in a viewable format, but they would not be able to edit or unsend the messages.
Right. That's an important point. So you can't, that's not a configurable option on the iPhone. You can't turn off recently deleted. You can't turn off, you can't configure the amount of days that it stays in recently deleted. It's going to be somewhere around 30. I think it's like 30 or 40, something like that, when the messages roll off into the sort of oblivion, off the conveyor belt into oblivion.
All right, more questions are coming in. We're going to, as long as we can keep you to the top of the hour, we're going to keep you answering questions. So with regard to M&As, mergers and acquisitions, do you foresee assessing iOS 16 as part of due diligence where applicable?
I don't know. What does that mean? Like assessing whether the target company has moved to iOS 16?
Yeah, I think if I could read between the lines, as probably part of a second request situation, or anticipating one, trying to assess whether your target or your acquiring company has this issue, basically.
I see. Yeah. I haven't thought about it, to be honest. Perhaps. It could be anywhere, in any situation where mobile data is at play, where mobile data is central to the litigation, and especially if there's key players talking, I think that iOS 16 could come into play. If there are situations where it's very important that the text messages of the E-suite or the C-suite, are preserved, then yeah, I could see it coming up.
Yeah, I think we've seen some pretty high-profile M&A or takeover attempts or whatever, where there have been all sorts of text messages going on. Yep. And okay, I think that was our last question. We've got your contact information up, and I want to remind everybody that your article, Jarrett, your Law 360 article on Apple's new messaging features will complicate e-discovery is one of the links and attachments. So if you look at your paperclip, you'll be able to just click right there. You can click over to Nelson Mullins' e-discovery practice and check out how Jarrett and team can assist you. In addition, we've got from Complex Discovery, an e-discovery total cost of ownership survey that has just been launched in fall of 2022. We'd love your input. And then up next on EDRM's global webinar channel on the 9th, reduce your spend on e-discovery using the IGRM. So Jarrett, Colin, Michael, you've done a fabulous job. Thank you very much for this very trend forward, very important webinar. And we thank our EDRM community for your kind attention. And we'll see you next time. We'll have you guys back. We'll see you next time on the EDRM Global Webinar channel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.